that we know what cooperative learning is, we've talked a little bit about ways to implement it using informal groups, formal groups, and base groups. How do we as instructors know of a group that's not working cooperatively? So just some red flags for you to think about is, first of all, maybe there's a lack of maturity in the group. And the lack of maturity may, in some cases, is that maybe we as the instructors haven't trained our students well enough to work in our groups, to work in groups. So again, this comes back to us a little bit in terms of the kind of guidance or the kind of training that we may need to do very, very early in our class to train students to how to work effectively in the groups. What students tell me is a lot of times they've worked in groups, they don't necessarily like working in groups, but when I ask them how many professors have actually talked to you about managing teams or managing groups, very few of them get any kind of training or directions on that. The free riding effect, you might guess, this is the situation where you have a group member that's not pulling his or her weight. And oftentimes when this happens is because we as instructors haven't built in enough positive interdependence or individual accountability into the assignment. So when you're developing an informal, formal, or base group cooperative assignment, think about what's that individual accountability and how are you going to monitor it so this doesn't happen. Motivation loss, I think that this is one that is especially challenging for formal groups or base groups. And my recommendation for this one is that frequently staying in touch with your groups in terms of their progress, either electronically or building in progress report sessions as part of the assignment, as part of the grade, will help with this. Lack of heterogeneous skills or abilities. And this one is really dependent upon the objectives that you have for the assignment. How much heterogeneity do you want on your teams, on your groups? Really depends on the objectives that you have. But oftentimes you want some level of skills. Maybe some students have better field skills for the things that I have students do. Other students have better analytical and computer skills. A group like that has one person good in the field, one person good in computers, maybe another person that's good at kind of organizing, would be a great mix of heterogeneity in a group. In my situations, having people that are just maybe all good with computer skills but no one without any field experience, it would not be a good situation. Signs of that a group is a cooperative group is there's clear interdependence. Students are showing individual and group accountability. They're producing things in a timely manner. They're having face-to-face meetings. I ask them actually to document the progress they're making and take notes of what the action items are that they're accomplishing during these face-to-face meetings. These face-to-face interactions are important for them to develop these small group and interpersonal skills about, how are they listening to their partners, how are they making decisions, how are they addressing challenges, and then how are they facilitating getting things done in a timely manner, how are they processing information. These are all signs that we as instructors, as we see these things, we know our groups are working cooperatively. But again, I'll go back to the point that the only way that we're going to know or see these signs is if we're monitoring and managing these groups. So don't expect to just give students the instructions the first day of class and expect them to show up on your desk the last day. It does take some management. I'm going to go back to talk about teaching students to work in cooperative groups, the feedback that I've heard from my own students as well as other colleagues that I know that have had students work on, especially like formal groups and base groups, is teach students what good, positive team member traits are in terms of how to be respectful, show up in meeting on times, show positive communication skills, professional communication skills. What are those? What's acceptable? And practice active listening. If people are in a group of 3 to 5 people, there's a lot of skills, a lot of experiences that are in the groups. Sitting and listening oftentimes is a good way to learn from your partners. Second of all is team building and management skills. Showing students some examples of how to stay organized. For example, I tell them they'll need data sheets before they go out in the field. Many of them have never developed a data sheet for collecting data. So we show them some examples of what a data sheet looks like and how data sheets help people stay organized in collecting data. How do they stay on task in terms of timetables? I encourage students when they meet with me that they assign a note taker and a presenter, and those roles are flipped when we meet because those notes are an important part of documenting what we've talked about as a group. Member responsibilities. Again, I request students to when we meet is who's going to be the primary presenter, who's going to be the note taker, who's going to bring copies, etc. I want everyone to have a task. Be inquiry based. I tell students that in their groups, make sure that there's people clarifying statements. There are people thinking about the implications of their work. How are they going to critique information? These are all parts of the process of developing good group products. Also practice good conflict resolution skills. In my junior senior level classes, I have a unit very early in the class associated with professionalism, where we talk about practicing good conflict resolution skills and how to do that, because undoubtedly throughout their career they're going to have to address conflicts, and the approach we use is what we call an interest-based approach. Is that, looking for what you and the person or persons you have a conflict with, what your common interests are, and then how do you move on from there in terms of picking options that address both of your interests. And last but not least is practice their presentation skills. Is that how they present themselves professionally is extremely important to them throughout their career, and they only get one chance for a first impression. And so it's important how to do that professionally. How can they talk about technical jargon, technical skills, but also explain it occasionally to people that aren't necessarily in their field.